your country, beautiful country. Thank you for bringing me back here. So let me just say that I have been asked to talk about, women in conflict. And I think you know that it is now what is happening in the world with the two panels, a world which is increasingly complex and dynamic. We know Ukraine, we know the Middle East, and we tend even to forget Africa, but ongoing war. So I will just do a little bit, bringing back maybe the context of our conflict in Africa, but the role of women in conflict resolution. In between, maybe also highlight the impact. But what can we do further in our case for women, peace, and security being implemented? So we have been affected by a lot of war, and we can talk about the context. But let me just give you a few figures. In one of the reports that we know that the Geneva Academy of International Humanitarian Law and Human Rights show that Africa has 35 conflicts of non-international character, making it the second most affected region by conflict in the world behind Asia. And I will not name many of those countries, DRC, Burkina, you name them, Sudan, and still going on. We didn't talk about extremism that is going on, but I just wanted to highlight that conflicts are still ongoing in Africa. And maybe when you look at the root cause of the conflict and the absence sometimes of women playing a key role in those, let me just highlight some of the root cause that we have seen. For example, when we look at the struggle for political power between various segments in our continent, it doesn't happen here, but sometime in our elections ended up by being, you remember, in Kenya and others, killing because of power struggle. Sometimes it's also marginalized. It has been said by the previous speaker, ethnic identity, religious, which have been used and misused also, and socio-economic factors. And in all this, women are not, for example, leading political parties. Very few in Africa. You see them in governance, high-level governance mechanism. I was just talking to one of my partners this morning, and I said, we have only one woman president right now in Africa. Imagine one. It's Tanzania. Ethiopia has gone 2 days ago. So we have only one. And only one who have been elected so far was Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. So we don't control really the resources, and we have also issues vis-a-vis the African resources that we don't control, and women are not at that level of controlling even the land in Africa. So we are absent most of the time, those who are fighting and those who are holding the guns. I don't say that women don't hold the guns. We have seen that in the picture in Ukraine. They engage because they want to defend their country. And we have seen it even in the civil war, that women engage in war as well. But let me just say also that during those wars that Liberia, Sierra Leone went to Liberia in 1996, the impact on the women, the body of the women being used and misused in the battlefield. That's a reality, you see. In the DRC, which sometimes we say the capital of rape, name it. That's the thing. It has been happening and misuse the body and not the contribution of the women. Of course, they are resilient. And that's what we saw again in Ukraine and in Gaza. Despite the crisis, the humanitarian crisis, the women are resilient. And that's one of the reasons also, because they know the context. And they are the ones that bear the brunt of those conflicts and the family. We need to make sure that they contribute to the discussion and be part of the solution. Let me also highlight that in many countries, when we look at their role as we look at the conflict resolution and peace building, in many countries that I have been visiting, I name Liberia as a country. We have 2 Nobel women winners, Ellen Johnson, Lima Bowie. But you might also recall the Manu River Women Peace Network, the one that breached the peace among 3 countries. It's not just an internal conflict, but it was a regional war between Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea. And the women were the ones who stand firm, and I could see how you are trying to support Ukraine, because at regional level, you know, things can happen, even though I have been hearing it, those who are internal have the one to make their mind and make peace. But the women of the 3 countries were the one who navigate and went to make bridge, you know, the gaps, because there was no dialogue, and make sure that at the end there is a table of dialogue. And up to now, those 3 countries are not fighting again since they have been part of the solution. And the General Assembly awarded them the Human Rights Prize, you might recall, years ago. Of course, women bring a difference. This is just an example. It has been researched, the researcher here have demonstrated that when they bring an agenda in the agreement and we include their issues, sometimes humanitarian, but also human security, because it's the absence of many things, health, education, in that agenda. But also they have their own say on what have made that conflict the root cause. They understand it as well, even if they were not part of those who triggered the war, but they are still the one who understand better than anybody what happened, and we need to have their voice at the table. Unfortunately, they have never been invited to be, even though it's a human right to bring women at the table. It's their right to be there, not just those who have the gun. But somebody have said it's a wise thing to do. I think it was Kofi Annan. He said, we wanted to have peace. Let's make sure that we bring the society to decide. And I was hearing what you said, that the constitution have to be coming from the people, because they know what is needed at the end of the day for their country. So not just those who hold the gun or the politician only, but others have to bring, and the women are part, and the young people in particular right now. So let me maybe also come to the issues that, because women have been absent in those structures, even though they have the right, even though they could contribute, even though we have seen and research have demonstrated that they are at the table, we bring lasting peace. But if they are absent, that agreement will fail in few years after that. So it means that they need to be there for us, and that's why we work very hard, many of you in this room, to make sure that we have what we call UN Resolution 1325, at least for the Security Council to discuss how women should be contributing and sitting wherever negotiation, and it is prevention. You know, the whole morning I was listening how the first agreement failed, how in the Ukraine, and they talk about, you know, why it has failed. But sometimes is the prevention that we need on this pillar, that we need also to see the contribution of women and the society to come in early warning before it is there. Because when war erupts, this morning I hear they say that it needs to be ripe before, you know, it means that millions of people die before they get tired and they sit at the table. So we need to prevent before conflict is part of our human environment. But we need to prevent that, and the preventing is not, and it's important that we involve the society, and that's where women's group have been at the forefront as well in preventive measure, but also early warning or quiet diplomacy, as we said, because that is important, not coming out, but making sure that everybody understands that there is a coming crisis, and let's work on it on the different actors as well. So when I was asked to become the first special envoy on women, peace, and security, the first in the world, Africa is always the first, even though we are still lagging behind to solve many of our issues, but we need to recognize that. It was the first, followed by Canada and others. Now we have a lot of special envoy or representative that deal with women, peace, and security. And when I look at the landscape of the African Union, we had, for example, 17 countries that have plan of action on women, peace, and security, only. Today we have 36 of them. And what it means for us was that for Africa to take ownership, even if it's born in Namibia, in the soil of Africa, but those who are not on war, even in conflict, did not see the necessity to have such an instrument. So our advocacy was first to make sure that Africa take leadership and ownership of Resolution 1325. And so far we have 36, it's not enough. Would love to see the 54 countries, all of them having a national action plan. But national action plan is not enough. It's just a policy document. If it's not voted by the parliament, being part of the development agenda, national action plan is not enough if there is no budget for it. National action plan is not implemented if the people are not part and parcel of this national action plan. So what we did also was to create in that ecosystem what we call women mediators, because we found that anytime there is mediation, people will say, where are the women? They are there, but they don't want to see the face of the women. But we needed to make sure that we have a network of women that have been, men don't need to be trained, but we know women, we say, okay, if it is skills, they have it, but let's make sure that, you know, you see the women in front. It has helped a lot with the FemWise. But also we realize that we need more than FemWise, and I will come back to these issues of why we also complement FemWise Africa, the women mediators, by something that we call the Africa Women Leaders Network. Because you need to have women in diplomacy. You need women as, because you are negotiating even during peace. When you have been deployed in New York or everywhere, women and men are negotiating. And for us, in our diplomatic circle, in our various mechanisms, we didn't have enough women at the leadership position. So we make sure that also we have the kind of leadership. I can say that young women leaders in different domains. It can be in the system, economic system, the social system, but we make sure that there are more women leaders in parliament and others. So FemWise, we have in each country of Africa a group of women that are ready to be deployed. It has served the purpose. For example, the recent negotiation in Ethiopia, we had Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, who has been co-mediator. We never had that before, to have women, even co-mediator. I'm not sure lead mediator, but co-mediator in the Ethiopian talk. The first thing she did was to convene the women from different ethnic groups in South Africa, sit down, open the door for them as well. In Sudan, we have the vice president, a former vice president of Uganda, Dr. Kazibwe, who is also part of the mediation team as FemWise. So we wanted to see them next to the men, former president male, but former president or prime minister or women leaders to be part. And FemWise Africa, those young people who have the technical support to the mediation team. It's happening right now. Maybe, we don't talk enough about how mediation are happening within the African Union, but we make sure that those women that are leaders at that level, nobody now is asking us, where are the women? And nobody is asking us, where are the young and the experts that can support the mediation as well? It's helped us in the Sudan case. In the Sudan case recently, we call on the women. Of course, my office have been following. From the first day, we were online with the women of Sudan and listening to the bomb. We were listening to them. And many of the dead body, they were describing how it was. And it's continued to happen. And they are outside, most of them. And I'm sure my sister from Sudan will talk about it, how it's impacting on Sudan. But we call on them in Kampala to try to make sure that when mediation is happening, they are part and their agenda is ready and they are part and parcel. And that because we had women, FemWise chair, but also Phumzile, myself, special envoy, but also the mediator and the men mediators to sit down with the women and listen to them in the starting. So that's the number one we did in building the ecosystem. National Action Plan and the system now, the numbers of women and their experience at the table. But not only that, because you can have beautiful action plan, but it's action and implementation. You need to monitor, because we know that 1325 does not have the provision for the accountability. And we need to look at that seriously in the years to come. So what we did in Africa, what I did, I'm coming from civil society. So you can see that I was representing the women who pushed me to take this, to challenge our leaders, and to say what we need is a monitoring mechanism. So after the 37 national chapter, we try to make sure that we have what we call the Continental Result Framework. We call member states to design indicators and try to make sure that we measure progress, at least to push them to report back. In CEDAW, we have a report, and civil society have shadow report. 1325 need report, accountability. Are we implementing what we decided to do, or is just a framework that we leave there and we don't communicate? So I think this is something that is happening. We had 22 countries that have reported twice. It's just a beginning, but we need to make it regular, but also sharing it to make sure that wherever we have gap, and name and shame, wherever we have the gaps, we are able to name and shame. We also establish open session which are happening in New York, but also in the Peace and Security Council in Africa. We want the Africa Peace and Security Council to have open debate like it happened in New York in October. This October, we're going to have also open debate. Maybe it's not known, but it's the time also to exchange what is going on. Centers of excellence in Africa, there are very few. And some of you are connecting with centers like PRIO, because we need to exchange to see how we are working together to do the research. Somebody have said that. We need to document, we need to research, and we need to make sure that people in the ground understand the dynamics. So there are few in Africa. We are putting them as a network, those centers of excellence. And lastly, but not just these, are few examples on what we are trying to do in the implementation of women, peace, and security. Recently we were, and of course, let me just, that without the support of our partners, the UN, countries like Norway, Germany, to name a few, Ireland, Denmark, US, we received the support. My office received those support to be able to convince our head of states and member states to get into this process of accountability. And I'm sure that recently some of you have been back to Namibia to help us. One of the gaps we found in the reporting is still women at the table of negotiation. We need to be there. And it's common sense if we are not there. So we just launched what we call the Swapomund process with Namibia and some like-minded member states to start now with the scorecard to name and shame again on negotiation. We need to do that on Sudan and many other countries that are on negotiation. If the mediator doesn't have a women team, and if we don't have at least co-mediator with a female, at least if we don't see that at the table itself, the gender agenda has been discussed. So those are key elements that we are putting, and we are testing it, and in the negotiation on Sudan as well. So just lastly, maybe recognizing that the Sahel is in crisis, and we need to look at and study what is going with the extremism that are affecting the population, and what can be done in terms of the disarmament of those. And we know also that it's the proxy war that you have discussed here is in the soil of the Sahel. And what is happening in Ukraine or what is happening in Gaza is also affecting the women of the Sahel. It's a theater of war of that. It's a reality, we like it or not. The power division, even if they're doing it in Ukraine and in somewhere else, it's coming in Africa as well. It's affected. So let me just say that while we are looking on the how, because we know the what, we know where it's happening, we know all the actors, it's the how we make sure that women are peace actors, and we need to do maybe in this 25th anniversary of 1325 to try together to push back the pushback. I hear today somebody say there are pushback. There are pushback. But we need to push back, unite in solidarity, and push back the pushback. If we don't, what affects you will affect me. What affects me will end by affecting you. So we need to be together on this to make sure that we push back the pushback. Do we need question ourselves for new resolution? Or do we more focus on implementation? It's a question that we need to talk about. Another resolution for what? Or do we really look into accountability? I think, or even the issue of action for prevention. But also, I hear every day the women talking about resources, and in particular resources on prevention. Those who are in the room know that the budget, cutting the budget, and we know equally that what is coming, we don't talk about it yet. It will come, I'm sure, climate change. How do you go in prevention and adaptation? It's fueling more the conflict in Africa, in the Sahel and other places. You know, the resources, the scarcity of water and so on is going on. So how do we make sure that we address those issues of prevention, but also the resources that are not available for the women's organization that are the resilient that are doing the work on the ground. We need to build the chain of solidarity. We need to make sure that what happened here today in this conference is not just another conference, but we are looking more into actions. We are together. What's happening in Africa is not isolated, is what is happening elsewhere in the multilateral system. And what is happening is Gaza is also concerning all of us. So then we can say humanity and women are at the center of building back what we call those values, what we call the norms. We need to bring it back. But also another conversation we will have is about the leadership. We need to have that conversation. Values and norms and human rights, you know, are human rights for all. In my own corner, I value my human rights. But when it comes to leadership, you see what we need again to question. Those who are governing, I listened to the first intervenant to say that maybe his leadership wants to keep the power and to deprive peace to the people. Maybe we need to question that. So for me, I think leadership of women matters because it's our right, but we will bring another value into the conversation and the dialogue at the table that we are discussing today. So thank you so much.